And we are live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to Coin Bureau Clips. Welcome back to Not Financial Advice Live. It is Thursday, the 4th of May. May the 4th be with you. And may the 4th be indeed with my two guests. As ever, I am joined by Rob Wolf from Digital Asset News. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks for having me, Guy.
And of course, Ben Cowan from Into the Cryptoverse. Ben, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me as well.
Thanks for joining, guys, and thanks everyone for watching today. A couple of bits of housekeeping before we get on with things. If you have any questions, you know what I'm like. I talk forever, so maybe we'll have time for some questions at the end. But if there are any questions, please do put them in the comments, and I will try to get round to them. And I should also say as well that you should most definitely, if you don't already follow Ben and Rob, then you absolutely should. You are missing out. There is Rob, Digital Asset News, and we have Ben as well somewhere as well. Let me just find that. So
it's always tricky, isn't it, Guy? It's always tricky to move back and
so
forth.
much. There's just so many things to click on. I was so pleased with myself for starting on time, and I've got completely overconfident, and I'm now just flailing around. So, with that said, let's kick off. Firstly, before we get into the questions that I had lined up for today, I just wanted to pick your brains very quickly. Any particular thoughts on yesterday's rate hike? Another 25 basis points, which I believe makes it 10 hikes on the bounce for Jay Powell and co. Rob, any quick thoughts on that before we crack on?
This is what we were talking about before the show. Well, I just think it's funny that we have people who say, one more, or like Ben said, one and done, and then every single time Jerome Powell's like, okay, quarter basis point, and then everybody's like blown away, like he actually raised it. I'm like, are we not listening to the same guy? Yeah. So I mean, it's not a surprise to me. I don't know. Maybe it surprises somebody.
There always seems to be someone out there to be surprised. Ben, any thoughts from you on that rate hike?
Yeah, I mean, pretty standard stuff, right? Just another 25 basis points. It's funny because it's like we've come a long way from 25 basis points back a year ago to now 5.25, and it really does show that during periods of high inflation, the Fed will go far beyond what the majority of people think they'll do. So yeah, I mean, we'll see if they actually are done this time, but I mean, I think it probably makes sense considering that you still have fairly high inflation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, it was kind of Groundhog Day to an extent, wasn't it? It's like 25 basis points. Ben, as you said earlier, pretty much very similar speech to what he always does, or seems to always do. So yeah, but as ever, there are still a few people surprised by it. Anyhow, let's dig into the questions then. So obviously, Fed rate hikes have been on the menu over the last day or so, but something else that is looming large on the horizon is the debt ceiling. Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, has been warning. She said basically we got to get this raised by the 1st of June, or we are in all sorts of trouble. We being the United States economy. So we're rolling towards hitting the debt ceiling, with some estimates of it being hit by early June. I guess first question then: what happens if the ceiling gets hit? What happens if this seeming impasse on Capitol Hill doesn't get resolved pronto? There's less than a month to go. Ben, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, history shows that normally this is like political theater, in the sense that most of the time they're going to raise the debt ceiling, right? I mean, that's what we've historically seen. And I know a lot of people say that the U.S. government has never defaulted, but that's actually not true. I mean, I think there are a few times in history where the U.S. has defaulted. I mean, not anything like in recent history. But I mean, I was actually just looking this up earlier. I mean, in 1862, there is a default. There is defaults involving gold bonds, with redeeming gold bonds with paper money back in 1933. There was something involving silver certificates back in 1968. and then there was they abandoned the Bretton Woods Agreement back in 1971. And so there are times where the U.S. government has defaulted, but I mean, again, like for the last 50, 60 years, it's basically just been like this, this political theater stunt where the politicians, they go back and forth up until the last minute, and then they eventually raise the debt ceiling. But I think there should be some concern, right? I think there should be some concern because there is a chance that it occurs. I don't think the odds of it occurring at this moment, I don't think the markets are suggesting that the odds are that high right now. I think maybe they still have confidence that the politicians will come through. But if it does happen, then then the U.S. government is unable to pay some of its bills, right? And I mean, that's not going to be a good thing. It's going to sort of diminish the standing, I think, of the United States throughout the world. And I also think that financial markets would take somewhat of a big hit. I think they took somewhat of a big hit back in 2011 when we had a crisis like this as well. So I don't think that anything good would occur with the U.S. Defaulting. So there are, I don't know if we should get into the nuances of everything, but there's a good chance, and I think Yellen said this not too long ago, that it could happen as early as like the beginning of June.
Mhm.
And so that's less than a month from now. And I think part of the reason it could happen that soon was because taxes, like, the sort of the income that they got from taxes was actually pretty light this year compared to last year. One of the reasons being that I think most people in the markets lost money in 2022. So they didn't have the same. By the way, there's an echo going on. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but
It's good to me, Ben.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, there's a little echo. I muted myself. I don't hear it. Guy, if you can try it, mute yourself, see if it happens over there. And then Ben,
Maybe
keep
it's me.
talking.
Yeah. So I don't even know what I was saying. So basically, it tends to be political theater. On the chance that they don't do it, it could happen as early as the first part of June, I believe.
Right.
Now there are some delayed taxes, I think, coming out of California that if we do shut down in June, that they could actually allow the government to sort of reopen back up, and then it becomes another problem in July. But this is probably going to be the talk of the summer: is will they raise the debt ceiling or will they not? And also, I would say too that even if they do raise it, the closer we get to the deadline without it raising, it will still diminish, I think, some of the credibility of the U.S. And I mean, that's what we saw. Again, that's what we saw back in 2011. Some of that credibility was diminished with the U.S. and markets took a pretty big hit. So I don't know if it's the next shoe to drop or not. Let's hope they get their act together. My personal opinion, I mean, I don't really talk politics, but I think it's ridiculous that the United States even has this as an issue. I mean, how often do we hear people talk about this in other countries? The fact that this, I mean, I agree with Powell. I mean, there's a lot of things I didn't agree with Powell yesterday on, like you said, the banking crisis had gotten a lot better, and then you see some of these banks down 50% after hours. But that is something I did agree with him on, that it's kind of insane that this is even a thing.
Yeah, it is kind of weird looking on from the sidelines, so to speak, and just seeing everything that's kind of going on in American politics at the moment, and how polarized it is. And yeah, I mean, it's perhaps a bit rich of me to say that when British politics is in a bit of a mess, but I think you guys have really managed to take it to another level at the moment. So, I mean, Rob, what are your thoughts? I mean, what for a start, like, what could be Ben kind of touched on this a little bit, but what could be the consequences for the US economy, for for global assets, really, if they don't get this sorted?
Well, I got to tell you, so if this happens, everything's going to be downgraded. America will be downgraded, just like I downgraded my green screen. I mean, when you don't have enough funds, you got to downgrade things, and that's just how it goes. I'm sorry. So there was this Well, I'll touch on what Ben said in a second, but there was this interview with Alan Greenspan on MSNBC. I caught it, and it was years ago. And the commentator said, "How does this work? For America, will we ever default on our loans, on our debts?" And Alan Greenspan said, "We will never default on our debts because we will always print money, and that is the advantage of being the world reserve currency." And from right there, this was years ago, he could say that with total authority and have no problems. However, with the de-dollarization that is going on, especially with all the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and then Saudi Arabia coming in, now you got these different places going, you know what? We don't really like your Ponzi scheme that's going on. All the printing that you're doing, which, that is what is leading to this massive inflation. We're not going to accept that. And like to touch on what Ben, and this will roll into the next question, which is, I disagree with Ben here on the theatrics, and we can't believe it. I can believe it because that's what politics is all about. It's all about a bargaining chip, and to say, well, if you don't want to do this, we're going to hold it back, and we're going to make the most ridiculous claims that we can possibly do, so we can get what we want and my constituents. And that's just how politics goes, right? I mean, they're just going to sit around and just say, well, as long as I get something, my constituents get something, and I get reelected, that's how it's going to work. So that's, I guess, would roll in the next part. So I'm not surprised with what's going on, but this time it is a little different because we are coming into the era of de-dollarization, potentially, with all the different countries that are saying we don't want the dollar.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to touch on as well, in terms of, I'm going to play sort of devil's advocate here, if that's the right phrase to use. But so this situation we've got in the States at the moment, where you've got this two parties at loggerheads, it's going to be very, very difficult to get a deal through. Is this the price? Is this the price we pay? Is this the price you pay in America and elsewhere for democracy? And because on the flip side, I feel I was thinking about this, and it's like you don't see this happening in China, for instance. The CCP, they want to get something through, it goes through. So who is what is this just the price that you have to pay for democracy? A less functional, a less efficient system that could that seems to be taking us to the brink of potentially fairly catastrophic economic consequences. But I guess that's better than the alternative, right?
Yeah, I think it's, well, I mean, the whole thing comes down to, people will say, well, it's we are living in a democracy, and the majority rules. But I had to tell you, there's all these forces behind the scenes that are pulling the strings, and I think we all know about those. I mean, we have different corporations and different entities, and of course the industrial war complex. So all these things that happen, like we think that these, some people believe that the politicians are really have our best interest at heart, and of course it all really comes down to is what everybody is getting. I gotta say, I do appreciate the politics in the UK, because everybody gets up and they scream at each other and they yell and they get it all out. And at the very end, I think people, because of that passion, they get it all out. I'm like, well, that's how it should be done. But here, like in America, it seems like we're more like the politicians are like passive aggressive, and then they make the most ridiculous claims, and they put things in these bills. Like for this one, they had talked about how the House Republicans had they wanted a reduction in solar panels, and to health care for the poor, and also for air traffic controllers, which are government employees, and they wanted to reduce that drastically so they could get this bill through. And of course the Democrats like, we don't want that. And unfortunately Democrats aren't really moving this thing forward. So like, it is this democracy? I guess it may be democracy in action, but it's just to me, I think it's it's just business as usual. Unfortunately, it frustrates me enough.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but I guess it's the best we've got at the moment till someone comes up with something better. Which moves us on quite nicely to the next question. Talking of someone coming up with hopefully something better, let's talk about crypto then. This was something that occurred to me over the week, and I'm keen to hear what you guys make of this. So, crypto is almost 15 years old now, decade and a half. Has it over or underachieved in that 15 years? And I guess, you know, to add something to that, have things like regulators, we all know the evil SEC and people like that, have they held it back? Have bad actors held it back, or has crypto itself held it back? Are we the industry ultimately to blame? So Ben, what are your thoughts on that?
I think Bitcoin and crypto as a whole has achieved a ton over the last 15 years. The fact that the fact that regulation is even an issue that we have to discuss just shows how far we've come, right? Like we're in the and then they fight you phase that we've previously talked about, right? The and then they fight you phase. And you don't really get to the and then they fight you phase without having some element of success. Because if it's not successful, then politicians aren't going to really waste their time talking about it. It's just not going to be something that they're concerned with. The market cap of crypto reached 3 trillion at the peak. That was actually where the .com stocks reached at the if you look at the NASDAQ and a basket of basically the most popular tech stocks back then, they reached 3 trillion. More than 20 years ago. And I mean, and again, like look at tech stocks today, like look at the internet today. So yeah, I think I think we've achieved a lot. I think part of the reason we've achieved so much in such a short period of time is probably because of low interest rates and very favorable monetary policy. But I mean, there's also a good chance we're going to go back to favorable monetary policy at some point. I mean, the Fed will pivot at some point, and we'll go back to that. I would say to some degree, I do think we've held ourselves back by a lot of the bad actors in the space, but that's not really crypto specific. I mean, that happens with any emerging asset class. I mean, again, look at tech stocks 20 something years ago, and you had your pets.com, you had all these these fluffy companies that just added a .com to their name, just sort of take advantage of that. And so you've seen similar stuff happen with crypto. So yeah, I think that kind of stuff has held us back some. I think that a lot of the scams and the rugs, I mean, I still scratch my head, honestly. Maybe you guys can help me with this, but like I feel like I see a new thread every day on Twitter about how some meme coin just rugged all the followers and I'm just like, how is this still a thing? Like how many times do we have to do this before people are going to learn their lesson? Like this is a very risky play, and there's a good chance this stuff's going to go that a lot of those coins are going to go to zero. So I do think that kind of stuff holds us back, because if that stuff didn't exist, then I think people would just be more so inclined to focus on like the blue chips, right? Like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then a few of the other projects that I would say, actually provide some type of real value. But the issue, I think, is that a lot of people come into the space and they listen to say like influencers promote these like micro cap meme coins without talking about any of the risks. And then what ends up happening is they lose all their money. And then they equate that scam and think that all of crypto is like that, right? And they think that Bitcoin is also like that, just because of this, this random other coin that was a rug pull. So I think to some degree we've held ourselves back. But I don't really, again, as I said earlier, I don't think that's crypto specific. I think it's going to happen no matter what asset class. I mean, we saw it with tech stocks as well. And so that, again, that's not a crypto specific thing. That's more of just like a human greed thing that is just always going to exist no matter what. And it kind of reminds me of how people are blaming crypto for the issues with banks. And it's like, well, no, I mean, we've had these issues with banks going back centuries, and crypto's only existed for 14 years. So how can crypto be the problem if this stuff has occurred for, centuries, well before crypto was even around. So I'd say it's achieved a lot. I do think that we are going into a period of higher interest rates in general. So like we'll probably see interest rate cuts, maybe sometime next year or something, and we'll go back to QE at some point. But I don't think that we're going to go back to like 0% anytime soon, because I mean, Powell should be very aware of how problematic that could be, and he's talked plenty of wanting to avoid the mistakes of the 70s. So in a higher interest rate environment, I think it actually will force innovation within crypto to have a little bit more utility, and to actually try to change the way that we operate in the world. Because one of the issues is that with such cheap monetary policy, fundamentals can sort of be pushed aside for a lot of different things, and people just focus on like what can go up the quickest, and can they get in and can they get out before other people do. But I think if you're going to just a sustained period of tighter monetary policy, then it should force us to bring out the best in us, right? Because we're going to have to. I mean, because if we don't, then it just sort of withers away. But I think it forces us to bring out the best, and to find that utility that a lot of people are, want to exist. I think a lot of people in crypto want crypto to be a lot more than what it is, right? A lot more than, just people flashing meme coins on a daily basis, and that's people want it to be more than that. And I think it will be more than that in an environment that has tighter monetary policy.
Yeah. And I'll just touch on what Ben talked about. It's all greed, right? Because the problem with all of these meme coins and actually, I mean, any crypto, I mean, even if you sound like in the top 100, excluding a couple, that you'll always hear the stories about how much people made. I made this much, I made that much. And then it's harder to, like, we know about the rug pulls because we're into crypto culture, and we're on Twitter, and we follow things, right? But the unfortunate unsuspecting fool who is out there, they hear about the Dogecoin millionaire, like, well, that works out pretty well. Nothing to take about the Dogecoin millionaire. And then we're going to talk about PEPE in a little bit and all these things. They hear and they resonate with those stories. And this is the crazy thing. We're in a bear market still. I don't think we've gone full bull yet. Who knows what's going to happen? And these are the things that are coming out right now. Imagine what it's going to be when we start to, have an uptick and we start to see more of a bull market. We're going to see so many different things come about, and people are going to, really get sucked in. And I will say, lastly, I will say this: for like Bitcoin, there's a great use for a store of value. There's only 21 million. It's not scarce. It is finite. There's only 21 million. That's all that will ever be. And when you take a look at the system that is out there, especially at the banks that are collapsing, you can see there's a real store of value use case for that. So when you get into it and you buy it, it's like you're actually getting into something that could, be there for the long haul. For the meme coins, the things that are going on that are out there, just think about this: if you're buying it, is what's the utility? And the reason why that I'm doing so well is because I'm dumping on somebody else. I hate to say it like that, but that is just the truth. With Bitcoin, I mean, I bought it at, the very first time was 8,000, then I went down to 3,000, so on and so forth. But I've also bought, around 50,000. You get Bitcoin at the price you deserve, unfortunately. And as time goes on, I think the price will go up, and it'll be a great store of value. I don't know about the meme coins, and you can get into it if you're a gambler, and that's fine. I'm just saying that the way that you make money off of that is you're dumping on somebody, and your success story is someone else's failure story on TikTok.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing though. Like, this is something that's been troubling me for a while now. Is that, we kind of talked about two things there, Rob, especially, you mentioned Bitcoin, and yeah, Bitcoin has this wonderful utility, this store of value that can be easily transferred to anyone in the world, anyone who's tried to do an international bank transfer or whatever it is. It's fantastic. There's no denying it. And then on the other hand, we've been talking about meme coins. As you say, we're going to talk about PEPE a little bit in just a moment or so. Yeah. But I mean, 15 years ago, well, no, let's say 10 years ago, and I remember a couple of weeks ago, Rob, you very wonderfully brought up the charts from 10 years ago, or whenever it was, and all these coins that were there, apart from the likes of Bitcoin and Ethereum, just didn't exist, and in fact, even Ethereum didn't. So, but are we still? Is there not a sense that we are still, here we are, 15 years in, and we are still talking about this use case for Bitcoin, this great store of value, this great way of transferring money. But we still haven't come up with another killer use case. That's something that frustrates me a little bit, and leads me to kind of think in a way that maybe we have held ourselves back because, okay, we've been, there have been bad actors who have taken advantage, but at the same time, we've let ourselves be sucked into these kind of centralized Ponzi schemes to an extent, but also we're not coming up with more use cases. We're still waiting for the killer crypto app. Is that fair, or am I expecting too much of an industry that's, let's face it, 15 years is still, in the grand scheme of things, not all that long a time?
I would say you're right. There is still some element of like waiting for that killer thing, right? And again, going back to tech stocks, it took until we had the sort of the actual development of real utility, and look at what tech stocks became, right? Like, but it had the tech stocks went through a very brutal process to get there. I would also say, with reference to Bitcoin specifically, and this is maybe a controversial take. I'm certainly not the first person to say it, but there is an idea that the altcoin market is sort of the test net for Bitcoin. So like people explore all these ideas on, in other ways to kind of see what works and what doesn't. And then eventually you see some of that stuff kind of make its way back to Bitcoin. And we're actually even seeing that now with like ordinals and stuff, that sort of stuff. And I know there's a lot of Bitcoin maxis who absolutely hate anything like that sort of stuff. Like they just want Bitcoin to just be what it is and not to really change. I'm not like that. I'm open to the idea of seeing people innovate and stuff, even with Bitcoin. But I do think you're right that I think your concern is valid. It's like, where is that killer thing? One thing I think about with crypto is a lot of times what people do is they create something that solves a problem that doesn't really exist, right? Like there's sometimes these they create the problem and then they make the solution for it. We really need to focus on creating that killer app or whatever it's going to be that actually fixes a problem that people have. Because look, I mean, there's of course use cases in some sense, right? I'm not saying there's no use cases to DeFi and all that sort of stuff, but the reality is that 99.9% of people have no ability or don't really care to get that involved, where they're going to have to figure out the mechanics of it that in depth. And so we need to figure out a way to make crypto, I think, a bit more user friendly, because I think it can be kind of scary to someone new. Like, hey, like here's your Bitcoin. Oh, but also don't hold it on the exchange. But also you need to get a hardware wallet, and then you have to have this like 24 word phrase, and don't lose it, because if you do, no one else, your money's just gone. There are a lot of elements, I think, that are somewhat scary, and so I think we need to make it a little bit more accessible to the masses.
Yeah, and I got a same thing with the like what you said, Guy. You're right. I mean, it's not too much to expect. But the thing is like when I first got into crypto in 2017, it was all about payments. Bitcoin was a peer-to-peer transaction, and that's what was written in the white paper, and that's what we believed it to be. And then, unfortunately, in 2017, when it went all the way up, we figured out, whoopsie, we can't do that, because the amount per transaction is just way too high, and people aren't going to accept that. They're going to use a Visa and a MasterCard, which is much easier, or they're going to use something else, and it just didn't happen. Now, moving forward, we got the store of value narrative, and that's working out pretty well so far, even though we're not really talking about the Bitcoin white paper. That's not really what it says, but it is a store of value. Then we get into Lightning Network, and people will always say this, but you don't understand. The Lightning Network is great for payments and it's just awesome. Have you used the Lightning Network? Have you spun up a node? Have you done everything that you need to do? Because I got to tell you, like, Lightning Network, it's fast and it's super cheap. It's nothing, right? Jack Mallers did a great job of implementing that for payments. But when you're actually using it in real world applications, I got a friend, Steven from Puerto Rico, and he owns a San Juan Smokehouse, and he's trying to show it to me on my phone. And keep in mind, I'm not totally an idiot, but when we downloaded the app and we did everything, and I'm like, this is kind of tough, man. I go, there's pretty much a barrier. He's like, yeah, but you just did this and this. He's like, okay, well, that didn't work out, but we'll try something else here. And I'm like, people aren't going to want to do this. All people want to know is, don't show me what's going on underneath the hood. Let me use it to where I don't know what's happening, and also make it cheap and fast. You do that, and then you've got a winner. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have that yet. And we should, but we don't yet.
Yeah, so much comes back to this idea of UX, doesn't it? This and to be fair, you know, that is being talked about. That's one of the things that I hear talked about on the grapevine, and I do see a lot of chatter about it in the crypto media. You know, people are aware, developers are aware that UX is a problem and that it needs to be fixed, because you're absolutely right, Rob. You know, people don't want to know how it works. They want it to work, and they want it to be convenient and easy. So yeah, perhaps I'm just sort of prone to get a little pessimistic about it sometimes, but yeah, we can't come along too quickly, in my opinion. Okay, then let's move on. I was going to talk about I was going to ask about your biggest L's in crypto, your biggest losses, but actually I think we've talked about Pepe a bit, so let's get him out of the way. Let's touch on the little green frog. So my question is this pump a sign of a potential market recovery now that rates have apparently, you know, depending on who you believe, now that the rate hiking cycle may have stopped? Or does Pepe just show us that crypto is still kind of, you know, a teenager, quite literally, and there's a lot of work to be done if we want it to be taken seriously? Ben, what do you think?
I mean, I think there's some element of like, we probably should separate like Bitcoin and the altcoin market to some degree, because like, no matter what, there's going to be things that happen in the altcoin market that, you know, are kind of going to leave something to be desired. With regards to that coin specifically, I do think that there's some element of a lot of investors feel probably somewhat starved for yield, because, you know, I mean, 2022 was mostly just down only. And I think a lot of people are sort of trying to relive the glory days of 2021 in 2023. And I mean, monetary conditions are a lot different today than they were back then. Again, it doesn't mean that things can't go up, right? And we also had an inverted yield curve in 2019, and we saw crypto overall had a fairly nice rally throughout the first half of the year. But history also shows us that at this phase in the cycle, we tend to get ahead of ourselves, and that we really, you know, getting back to the halving and more favorable monetary policy will ultimately get us to better times that are more sustained, right? That can last for, you know, a couple of years, not just a few months. My guess is that it's just I mean, to be completely honest, I think, and I mean, like I've said this before, and I know it draws a lot of criticism, but I think a lot of these meme coins are just being put out there to suck in liquidity from people who are willing to give these people their liquidity. There's this guy on Twitter. I think we've talked about him before, Zach, right? He's I think a great person to follow, because he posts about this stuff a lot. Zach XBT, and he you know, he showed the other day how there's one wallet, I believe, that is, I mean, literally responsible for launching like multiple meme coins on a daily basis going back for like the last year. And they just keep doing it, and then they you know, they get the ETH from it, they send it to the same place, and they just keep doing it over and over and over again. And I've said before, right, like the altcoin casino will stay open until everyone's lost their money. I think that's and we saw the same thing in 2019 as well, right? Some altcoins rallied, and then they, a lot of them ended up putting in new lows later in 2019 and in 2020, when we had that very brief recession, and then the Fed printed our way out. So I think you're probably going to see something similar, right? I mean, I think a lot of the meme coins are just liquidity grabs, and they will eventually fade back down. And I know it's like a hard thing or I know a lot of people don't want to believe that, especially when these things are going up, because it's like, well, like, oh, well, it's up X amount over the last week, so you must be wrong. But I mean, just look how many meme coins were up, and people use that as an excuse for why it wasn't a scam. And then you fast forward like a year or 6 months, and you see that it was just a pure scam, right? And again, going back to the last question, Guy, is how do we get into this real world utility? I think a lot of the memes and stuff, if they don't actually provide real world utility, or if they're not being promoted by billionaires on a daily basis, right? A lot of them will slowly lose value, because you have to have a I guess you don't have to have anything, right? But theoretically speaking, you need to have a business that is actually profitable and making money and providing real world utility. I mean, again, I know we live in a world that the culture is of course meme coins, and maybe I'm underestimating that to some degree, but it just seems like a very risky thing. So I would be careful. I would say I would be very, very careful with the meme coins. Just because they pump doesn't mean they're not a scam. And try to focus on the projects, I think, that are actually providing value to the world, and not just ones that are just liquidity grabs.
Yeah, I will say, just to touch on what Ben said, maybe we're too harsh on the meme coin sometimes. Like, I know what I just said, but maybe it's like a good proving ground on how to buy quickly and sell quickly. Like, because we're always talking about, like, buy, and we don't really talk too much about sell. Maybe it's just like a training wheels type of thing. Like, okay, if you're gonna buy this, you're gonna have to get out quicker than you think, because if not, you're gonna hold a bunch of bags. And that's what everybody's been doing, right? They don't sell fast enough, and they're bag holders. Welcome to the club. Everybody at one point or another is going to be a big bag holder, and that's just really how it goes. But I mean, for all these things, there's still people out there doing quite well, albeit on the backs of something else. But I will say that some of these meme coins become a community, and it's very rare. But some of these become like, this is a good quote from, it was Ivan on Tech, and he talked about how one of the few moats that are out there for crypto projects are a rabid community. When you can have a community, it doesn't matter sometimes of the utility and what's being built on it, and even like the fundamentals, but the utility keeps it up. And I'm not going to specifically say any certain community, but you can see it, and I'm sure everybody's right now thinking their specific crypto project in their community, and it seems like those things become so. Like, if you're going to invest into a meme coin, it becomes like a real hardcore community. You're going to do quite well for quite some time, because the community is what will keep it afloat, not the utility, not things that are going on. So it's just another way to look at things.
Just to disagree when we get the opportunity to.
Great.
I think the whole community argument is complete and utter garbage. I do. I mean, look, a lot of this stuff was pushed out in 2021, and look at all the meme coins from back then. I mean, most of them are down so much. I mean, everything is, right? To be fair, everything is down. But I mean, like, think about it like this. Like, I think to some degree, a lot of times, like, crypto investors live in this like fantasy world of like imagine an earnings call. Like, if a crypto project had to report earnings, like, hey, and they talk to their investors, hey, we were only, we only got, like, we only had 7 scams on our network this quarter. We lost all this money because we got hacked, but our community is great, right? Like, no one would care. Like, I mean, like, this is how we separate like the type of investor, right? Like, I feel like there's a lot of serious investors out there outside of the cryptoverse that just look at us and roll their eyes, because it's like, you know, what are you guys doing? Like, what value to the world does it actually provide? These meme coins, like, what value does it provide? Yeah, okay, it creates some community. You know, we have communities all sorts of places. Like, I'm involved in like the chess community, or I'm involved in like playing disc golf or playing soccer, right? We don't need a cryptocurrency to sort of bring us together. I think that the community aspect is far overblown, and the community aspect can also create an entire army of bag holders, because they just sort of look to each other and say, well, it's a great community, why isn't it going up? Well, it's not going to go up over the long haul if there's not real world value provided for most cases, right? I mean, you know, there are some exceptions. I mean, you could look at some of the older meme coins, and yeah, I mean, a lot of them have done somewhat. Some of them, not a lot. Some of them have done well, but again, for every meme coin that you know has been around and has gone up for years over years, there's like 1,000 that just got rug pulled, and people forgot about them. You know, we weren't talking about this coin 2 months ago because it wasn't around, right? And there's a good chance that 5 months from now, you know, there's a good chance that people will just move on to another one, and another one, and another one, right? And it's just, there's always another one that has a great community. It eventually gets rug pulled, or you know, the early investors sell, and they just move on to the next one, and then they prop that one up as having a great community. The reality is all these communities for these meme coins, they're all the same community. It's just the people bouncing around from one community to another and chasing theoretical gains. So I just want to disagree when we can.
Right now, everybody in these communities have just recorded Ben saying that and going, we are going to ride this out because Ben Cowan, we're going to make sure he's wrong, and it's going to be blasted all over Twitter.
No, I hope so. So like that way, if we see some of these meme coins continue to go up, they can say, well, Ben was like, you know, Ben was bearish on the meme right before it exploded or something.
Ben and his Bitcoin dominance.
Hey, you know what? I will say, everyone has given me a hard time about it, but guess what? Dominance is over 48%. And where was it? You know, where was it 6 months ago? It was at 40%. So, you know, people can fight it all they want. It doesn't change the fact that it's happening.
You're not worried that Pepe is going to suck some of that money out of Bitcoin then?
No, in fact, quite the opposite. Probably the early people who got into it are going to go back, well, maybe not. They might not go back to Bitcoin, but they would go back to a good chance they would go back to Ethereum, and then Ethereum goes back to Bitcoin, though, because again, it's the phase of the cycle where the dominance goes higher, and people can I see people complain about it and argue about it all the time, and I just look at it and say, well, you know, last month the dominance was like 45%. The month before that was 43%. Before that it was 40%, and it just keeps going higher.
And then someone will say, it's this one meme. This one coin went up. I'm gonna blast it all over.
Yeah. No,
and
I mean,
that's the one.
No, in 3 months from now, people are going to be saying, "Oh, the dominance dropped from 53% to 51%." Right. And they're going to be saying, they're using that as the reason why the altcoins are not bleeding. It's just look at the chart. I mean, the dominance is up and to the right for a long time.
So Ben is not worried by Pepe. That's good to see. It occurs to me that I guess one of the big winners from all this must be Ethereum validators, because gas fees on Ethereum are just through the roof at the moment, all because of meme coin trading. Before we move on to that, before we move off this topic, does it matter? I mean, we're in a bear market, so you know the people who are still here are most likely crypto OGs. They most likely know what they're doing. If this was a bull market and we had lots of people new to the space, then I'd be tempted to be more worried about this, or to be sort of more active in trying to warn people of it. But I kind of feel that anyone who's around now in crypto, they know what they're doing with a meme coin, don't they? They know that there's a good chance they'll lose their shirt, but they don't care. They've been around. They've ridden that roller coaster up and down, as Ben says. you know, they've probably been, before they were members of the PEPE community, they were members of the Doge community, SHIB community, you know, they'll be members of whatever community comes after. So, hey, you know, perhaps just let them get on with it. I guess they seem to assume they know what they're doing by this stage if they're still here. Okay, so yeah, well, I mean, Pepe it's certainly keeping things interesting. Certainly beats talking about the Federal Reserve all the time.
Right.
Moving on from sort of meme coins, though, can I just ask you guys quickly what your biggest L, your biggest loss in crypto was? Was there any particular coin or token that you passed on and then went to the moon? And if so, don't feel, you know, perhaps it does still hurt. So don't feel you have to you have to share it. But yeah, is there any particular regrets that you have? Rob, I'll start with you first.
Just for crypto token, there's a lot of projects out there that I passed, and like any investor out there, you're gonna pass on way more crypto projects than you're gonna get into, and you're gonna see it just go up. You're like, man, I wish I would have done that. Like I remember back in the day when Solana was coming up, people were telling me Solana's gonna be the next big thing. I'm like, I don't know it. I'll do some research on it at some point. I never did. And then like I, you know, got into it a little bit later. Then I think it jumped all the way up to like, I mean, it was nothing. And then all the way to maybe 200 somewhere. I don't remember. And then of course it crashed down with FTX, and now it's making a rebound. But just for that, like we all get shilled daily on the different projects that I missed. I missed Pepe. I missed, like I said, Solana. I missed a ton of other things, and I'm okay with it because I know that if I just stick around for the long haul, I'll be just fine. So that's that part for crypto. But the bigger part, for the biggest L's I've taken in the crypto industry, and essentially just outside of projects, is Celsius and Voyager. Those two ones, those are the biggest losses that not just me, but the things that I talked about before. And those are the ones that still sting. But it's a great lesson because now it gives me back to the fundamentals, and hopefully we can avoid that stuff moving forward. So that's it.
Yeah, wise words. Ben, what about you? Any particular L's that you want to discuss? Have you made your peace with them?
Well, after ranting about meme coins, maybe the biggest L is that I've never bought one.
You could have made some easy money.
Yeah, you could have made millions, Ben.
No, I think sort of my view on it is I've never bought one because it's like I have a hard time wrapping my head around like why there's any value there. But then I think on 99.9% of them, I've been right? Like most of them just go to zero. But there are a few that have continued to put in new highs from like one cycle to another. And so, you know, while I have a very opinionated view about them, perhaps the person who got the laugh is the person who had some of them that went up a lot during the last cycle. So I guess that's one. I would say, but I don't really see myself changing on that either. But I'd say another one is, you know, I learned about crypto back in like over a decade ago, but I didn't buy any. That's probably a pretty big loss right there. I rationalized that one by saying, I was in college. Like, even if I had put money in it, it wouldn't have been a lot of money. And I also probably would have sold it long ago after the first 10x move. And if I hadn't sold it, I probably would have lost it in Mt. Gox or something. So that's kind of how I rationalize like that sort of stuff, I guess. And then there was the other example is I did lose. I lost the private key to one of my wallets one time a while back. It was during during a time that I moved, and I have more than one, and I just couldn't find one, and I've never found it. So there's some crypto sitting out there that this happened a long time ago. But yeah, I never found the private keys for it, and I just had to write it off as a loss. And it kind of stings sometimes when you kind of like look at it and you know what it's worth now. if you actually had it, you know, but I just have to like remind myself that it's not a thing. Like I don't have it anymore. I just have to write it off.
It's that thing people, you know, whenever anyone talks about the 21 million limit on Bitcoin, it's always like, if you knew how much Bitcoin was sitting on wallets that either at the bottom of landfills or Satoshi's original wallet, or in, I think in so many cases, Ben, instances like that, people who've got it sitting there, it's like, I lost the keys. I don't know. Yeah, it's a lot less. It's going to be a lot less than 21 million when the final reckoning comes in. Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, I think it was interesting, particularly what you said, Ben, about when you first heard about it, and that was, that's obviously something that I still think about, and I wish I'd learned that lesson quicker. Of if you're curious about something, if you want to know about something, then you have to get into it. This idea. This is why it's always kind of galling when the likes of Charlie Munger or Warren Buffett kick off about Bitcoin. It's like, they don't own any. So, the only way you can truly understand something is to own it. So I wish I'd taken the plunge on that a bit sooner, obviously. A couple of other instances. Yeah, exactly. Gary Gensler. Yeah. I remember buying some ETH back when it was $200. And nice. I remember at the time when I bought it, I just knew it was going to go up, and something held me back. I could have bought more and I didn't. And I look back on that and think, why did I not just trust my instincts? Something just, it was a strange feeling.
That was,
and obviously things like
lifetime.
What was that, Ben?
I said that was the accumulation phase of a lifetime, back when it was $100.
Yeah, like everything else. Why didn't you buy Bitcoin when it was a penny? Why didn't you buy Ethereum at 50? You're, of course. Yeah, it's all your fault, guy.
And you have to be philosophical about it, don't you? Like both of you guys are. You have to go, well, there was a lesson in there somewhere, and so long as I've learned it, then that's the important thing. And the other L that comes to mind is obviously Terra and UST. Just that still gnaws at me, because we should have seen that. And I think we got kind of carried away with that, and but like I say, we live, we learn. And speaking of learning, gosh, that's a perfect segue into my final question. First of all, can I just ask, if you're reading something relevant at the moment, what are you reading? And what 3 books would you recommend to anyone who is interested, who's maybe new to crypto, or maybe knows a little bit about it, but is interested in really kind of getting to grips with it? And the Bitcoin Standard, I think, that's basically the Bible, isn't it? So you have to have that. But Rob, are there any particular books? What are you reading, and are there any books you recommend?
For the Bitcoin Standard, but of course the Bitcoin white paper, we talk about that. It's only 9 pages, so it's very easy to find. If you got a Mac, apparently it's in every single Mac that's ever been produced. So you can find it right now on your Mac. So that one, there's a book I always reference. It's called This Time Is Different, 8 Centuries of Financial Folly. And it just takes a look at just how we all think that things are different, but it's always just a repeat. There is a baseline, there is an ascension, there's a crescendo, and then there's just a fall off. And it's just financial, times throughout history. You can go back South Sea Bubble, Great Depression, financial crisis, Asia, and then of course what's going on right now. And then there's one that I really always take from. It's if you're gonna just be an investor, you kind of got to be kind of a little bit of stoic. So I always recommend the Meditations, Marcus Aurelius, or if you just want to get some great stories from a multitude of Stoics that are out there, then I recommend The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And that just kind of keeps you grounded and not going a little bit too out of whack. And you can just understand that, there's going to be impediments to get you to where you want to go. But as long as you just stay the course, good things happen over time. So those are the books I recommend.
chimes as I know you, Rob. That chimes perfectly to me with your with who you are, with your sort of overall philosophy. Ben, what about you? Any particular? Are you reading anything particular at the moment? Any recommendations?
The stuff I'm reading right now isn't really that relevant to crypto, but I would say some. I mean, obviously you said, of course, there's the Bitcoin Standard, there's the Bitcoin White Paper. There's a couple of by Andreas Antonopoulos, Mastering Bitcoin, which is more of a sort of the technical side of things. And then there's also The Internet of Money by the same guy. Is an interesting one as well. But yeah, that's probably what I would recommend. Mostly, so I mean, I would say it's the, if you don't know who he is, I mean, he's one of the OGs, right? He's still
real OGs.
Yeah. Like I still look back and you know, you can see his talk back when he was giving it at a conference. There was like 3 people in the room. He's talking about Bitcoin and like no one cared. And I mean, like, I think I even knew about it back then, but even I didn't care, you know? So yeah, I mean, I think I like getting the opinions of the people who saw and who really saw the value very, very early on. So those are some I'd recommend.
Yeah, Andreas is, I mean, he's been in it so long, hasn't he? They don't come much more OG than Andreas.
True.
Yeah, I brought some props along actually, because I thought, well, I'm asking the question, I should have something to add. So I'm just going to recommend a few quickly, just on crypto, really, because I think there are some, for a fairly young industry that can get pretty complex, I think there are some surprisingly good books out there about it. So for anyone wanting to get to grips with the basics, Bubble or Revolution, is that coming? Is that
I can
displaying
see it
the right way around?
Nice.
Bubble or Revolution. A bunch of guys, I think, who worked at places like Facebook, Microsoft, and Google. It's really good for explaining kind of the basics, especially some of the more complicated stuff. So that's highly recommended. I don't know if you've come across this one before as well, The Truth Machine. This is all about blockchain. This is guys who used to work, I think, for the Wall Street Journal, among others. So they're kind of old school journalists. This is brilliant on blockchain. It's a bit out of date now. I mean, it's at least 10 years old, I think, but it's still really good. So I recommend that, The Truth Machine. A couple of others, Digital Gold. Nathaniel Popper is just, it's one of the, it's about the sort of the early days of Bitcoin, the story of Bitcoin, and it's just great. It's so readable and just a brilliant one for introducing you, I think, to people like Andreas Antonopoulos, people like that, the Eric Voorhees, that sort of person, the guys who have been in there almost since day one. And this has been kind of an invaluable one for me doing research. I remember researching sort of, the basics of Bitcoin, the story of Bitcoin, and that is, but yeah, really can't do without that. Again, quite old. I think it's 2015 this was published, but an old one, but a good one. And then I saw a couple of people in the comments mention things like The Infinite Machine, Camilla Russo's book on Ethereum, which is fantastic. My copy is actually at home, but I do have my copy of The Cryptopians by Laura Shin, the wonderful podcast host. That's about the early days of Ethereum as well. I think they're both getting made into movie. I think one's getting made into a movie and the other one's getting made into a TV series or something like that.
Oh, I bet Charles Hoskinson's going to love that.
Yeah, for anyone unfamiliar, there's some stuff about Charles Hoskinson in here that he was not particularly happy with. But it is they're both a great read. And I think I've said this before. I don't know if I've mentioned this on the live stream before, but I truly believe that when Ethereum the movie comes out and Ethereum the Netflix series, that will be the peak of the next bull market. Just so you know, that's some hot alpha for you guys there. I'm
taking that one to the
watch it out.
Yeah,
you heard it here first.
I'm selling all my Bitcoin as soon as that comes out. Bam, bam.
Yeah, just wait till then. Okay, I think that is pretty much an hour. So thank you everyone for tuning in today. Thank you for joining us. Let me just see if I collected any questions. A couple of people saying, see you in London. Meme coins are a lottery ticket. Let's be honest. well,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a
I
good
guess
way to
so.
look at it. A lottery ticket. Yeah, most are gonna be losers
Yeah.
and a couple winners.
Hopefully,
Yeah,
I'll see some people in Miami. It's only a couple weeks from now.
Yeah, who knows? I might even be there.
Yeah.
Who knows?
You will be there.
I'm telling you, man. If those Real Housewives show up, I'm definitely gonna show up.
Someone's asking, can Ben talk about chess some? I'm afraid we just don't have time for Ben
I don't
on
think we
chess
have that much
at
time.
this point.
We did just have the
But perhaps another
we did just
another
have
time.
a world chess champion crowned, Ding Loren. So congratulations to him.
Okay.
That's very nice. You know what we should do, Ben? Like I'm awful at chess. One day we'll just like you'll be on the show and we'll be talking and we'll do like some kind of like we'll play a game of chess as we talk about the news and then you obliterate me.
Did you hear what my master plan was for my channel? It was to use crypto, the hype around crypto to get to 1 million subscribers, and once I get to 1 million, just convert it to a chess channel. And then everyone's gonna wonder like, who's this guy? You know, how does he have 1 million subscribers? He's talking about chess. But ever since I made that plan, there are some chess YouTube channels that have now gone above 1 million subscribers and even 2 million subscribers. So it's not it's not as great of a plan as it once was, but
that's not bad. Do that. Just totally rug pull everybody. So go from crypto and just go right
into
to
the
chess.
chess first and just like act like everything's normal and just start talking about chess every day.
Nice.
Well, chaps, thanks so much for joining today. We'll wrap it up there. So just before we go, can I just mention a couple of things? Can I direct people? We were talking about PEPE earlier, and that reminded me that we have a new channel here at Coin Bureau, Coin Bureau Trading. And actually, Dan, who runs that channel, has done a brilliant video all about PEPE and whether it kind of whether it's something that can, you can use technical analysis on. So do check that out, Coin Bureau Trading. He's a great guy, Dan, and well worth a look. And can I also, of course, mention as well that we have the Coin Bureau live event coming up in June. So just over, I should say, a month's time. And as I should remind you as well, please don't forget, if you're not already subscribed to Rob and Ben's channels, I imagine you are. But if you're on the off chance that you're not, you must do so immediately. So that's about it for this week. Where are we next week, gentlemen? Who's hosting us next week?
It should be on my channel next week.
Okay, so it'll just be a discussion about chess next week.
Right. Yeah. I'll ask you, E4 or D4. Make sure you're studied up.
Perfect.
Don't miss it, folks. Don't miss it. All right, Ben, thank you very much. Rob, thank you. Great to see you guys. See you same time, Ben's channel next week.
See ya.
Thanks for watching, everyone. See you soon.
Into the chess of